Virgin Cowboy waited for his black mail-order bride. But when a black obese teen arrived, the dusty street erupted in cruel laughter as the trembling girl stepped from the train. The townsfolk pointed and whispered, placing bets on how quickly the desperate rancher would send the fat child back where she came from. Her fate seemed sealed, another broken promise in a land that devours the weak. But the awkward cowboy saw something others missed in her quiet dignity, and the mysterious herbs clutched in her weathered satchel. As his dying ranch teetered on the edge of ruin and railroad men circled like vultures, he faced an impossible choice between social acceptance and survival. Hidden beneath her scorned exterior lay a gift that could save them both, or destroy everything if the wrong people discovered her secret. Would their unlikely partnership become the town's salvation or its downfall? Jack Callahan wiped his sweaty palms against his best trousers for the third time. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Tumbleweed Junction's single dirt road. At 24, he owned more land than most men twice his age, but the weight of loneliness pressed heavier than any physical burden he'd ever carried. His parents had died when he was 16, leaving him their sprawling ranch and a lifetime of awkward silences in town. Social gatherings felt like navigating a minefield. Women his age giggled behind gloved hands whenever he stammered through basic conversation. The correspondence marriage had seemed like divine intervention. Ruth Belfield's letters painted pictures of a mature woman seeking partnership rather than romance. Someone who understood that survival mattered more than poetry. Gideon Marsh leaned against the saloon post, his massive frame casting shadows across the wooden walkway. His booming voice carried easily across the street. "Look at poor Jack, all dressed up for his mail-order woman. Bet she takes one look at that stuttering fool and hightails it back east." The small crowd that had gathered chuckled. News traveled fast in towns where entertainment was scarce. Everyone knew about Jack's arrangement. Most figured it was his only shot at companionship. The train's whistle shrieked in the distance. Black smoke billowed above the horizon like storm clouds. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. He clutched Ruth's latest letter, reading her description again. Tall, experienced in ranch work, eager for a fresh start. The locomotive thundered into the station with a shower of sparks and steam. Jack stepped forward, scanning the emerging passengers. A businessman in a rumpled suit, an elderly woman clutching a carpet bag, a family with 3 small children. Then she appeared. The girl couldn't have been older than 17. Her dark skin glistened with perspiration from the long journey, her simple dress strained against her heavy frame. She carried a worn leather satchel and moved with careful dignity despite the obvious exhaustion. The crowd's murmur rose like a gathering storm. Jack felt his face burn with confusion and embarrassment. This couldn't be Ruth. This was barely more than a child. "Well, I'll be damned." Gideon's voice boomed across the platform. "Jack's bride ain't quite what he ordered." Laughter erupted from the gathered townspeople. The girl's shoulders tensed, but she kept her chin raised. Her eyes swept the crowd until they found Jack's face. She walked directly toward him. "You're Jack Callahan." Her voice was steady despite the hostile attention. Jack nodded, unable to find words. "I'm Cora Belfield, Ruth's niece. My aunt took fever during the journey. She died 3 days outside Kansas City." The simple statement hit Jack like a physical blow. He stared at this unexpected girl who had traveled hundreds of miles to deliver news that shattered his carefully laid plans. "Why didn't you turn back?" "Had nowhere else to go." The honesty in her answer cut through his disappointment. Behind them, the crowd pressed closer, hungry for drama. "This is Rich," someone called out. The desperate cowboy and the fat girl. Cora's jaw tightened, but she didn't turn around. Jack felt anger flare in his chest. These people had nothing better to do than mock someone's misfortune. Sheriff Willis pushed through the crowd, his weathered face showing concern rather than amusement. "Folks, show's over. Everyone back to your business." The crowd dispersed slowly, still throwing glances over their shoulders. Gideon lingered longest, his cold smile promising future entertainment at their expense. "You got arrangements made, Jack." Jack nodded toward his wagon. Cora followed without another word, her satchel clutched tightly against her chest. The ride to his ranch passed in uncomfortable silence. Questions burned in his throat, but he couldn't figure out how to ask them without sounding cruel. His ranch house sat in a valley surrounded by rolling hills. The building needed paint, and the fence posts leaned at odd angles. Everything showed signs of a man struggling to maintain too much property alone. Cora studied the landscape with intelligent eyes. She noticed things: the healthy grass near the creek, the solid construction of the barn, the way his cattle gathered in the shade while fed despite the summer heat. "Your aunt wrote about ranch experience. She taught me some. My grandmother knew more about animals than most veterinarians." That evening, as Jack prepared a simple meal, he watched Cora arrange her few possessions in the spare room. Everything she owned fit in that single satchel: clothes, a few books, and several small cloth bags that smelled of herbs and earth. "What's in those pouches?" "Medicine, for healing." She offered no further explanation. Jack didn't press. They ate in silence, both understanding that tomorrow would bring more scrutiny from town, more questions neither of them could answer. Outside, his stallion Thunder whinnied restlessly in the corral. The sound carried a note of distress that made Jack frown. The horse had seemed fine that morning. If you are enjoying this story of how unexpected arrivals can change destinies forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next part at Jack's ranch will completely change everything they thought they knew about survival. Jack woke to Thunder's agonized screams piercing the pre-dawn darkness. He bolted from his bed, grabbing his boots and racing toward the corral. The stallion thrashed against the fence posts, foam coating his muzzle, eyes rolling white with pain. Cora appeared beside him, fully dressed despite the early hour. She moved toward the gate without hesitation. "Don't get close. He might kick." She ignored Jack's warning, slipping between the fence rails with surprising grace. Thunder's breathing came in harsh, labored gasps. His legs trembled as if they could barely support his weight. "How long has he been like this?" "Just started. He was fine yesterday." Cora circled the horse slowly, her movements calm and deliberate. Thunder's ears flicked toward her voice when she made soft clicking sounds. The wild panic in his eyes dimmed slightly. Jack had raised Thunder from a foal. The stallion represented his last connection to his father, who had traded a month's wages for the young horse. More importantly, Thunder was his most valuable asset. Without him, the ranch would collapse within months. "I'll ride for Doc Morrison." "Won't help." Cora's flat statement stopped Jack mid-turn. She knelt beside Thunder's water trough, running her fingers along the rim. Her nose wrinkled at some smell Jack couldn't detect. "What do you mean? This isn't sickness. It's poison." The word hit Jack like a physical blow. Who would poison his horse? Why would anyone want to destroy the one thing keeping his ranch operational? Cora opened her leather satchel, pulling out several small cloth pouches. The herbs inside looked like dried weeds to Jack, but she handled them with the precision of a pharmacist measuring medicine. "My grandmother treated horses for plantation owners before the war. She taught me to recognize different kinds of poisoning." Jack had never heard Cora speak more than a few words at once. Now her voice carried quiet authority that commanded attention. "What kind of poison?" "Something that attacks the stomach and blood, probably mixed in his feed or water." She crushed dried leaves between her palms. "These plants can counteract it, but only if we act fast." Dawn was still hours away. Doc Morrison lived 12 miles from the ranch. Even if Jack rode hard, Thunder would be dead before any help arrived. He had two choices: trust this girl he barely knew or watch his horse die. Thunder collapsed to his side, legs kicking weakly against the dirt. His breathing became more labored. Jack made his decision. "What do you need?" Cora worked with swift efficiency. She mixed different herbs in Jack's largest cooking pot, adding hot water to create a bitter-smelling brew. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, measuring amounts by touch and instinct rather than written recipes. Hold his head steady. Jack wrapped his arms around Thunder's massive skull, feeling the horse's labored breathing against his chest. Cora forced the herbal mixture between Thunder's lips using a metal funnel. Most of the liquid ran out, but she persisted until the horse swallowed several mouthfuls. Now we wait. She settled beside the fallen stallion, one hand resting on his neck to monitor his pulse. Jack had never seen anyone work with such calm focus under pressure. Most people would have panicked or given up entirely. Where did you really learn this? My grandmother was born into slavery on a tobacco plantation in Virginia. The owner made her tend to all the animals because she had a gift for healing. After emancipation, she moved north and continued practicing. Cora's voice carried no bitterness, just matter-of-fact acceptance of her family's history. Her fingers traced patterns in Thunder's mane while she spoke. She taught me that plants are like people. Each one has a purpose, but you have to understand their nature before they'll help you. What about your parents? My father was a teacher, first in our family to read and write. He believed education was the only way to true freedom. She glanced at Jack. My mother died when I was small. Grandmother raised me after that. Jack tried to imagine this girl's childhood, learning to read while mixing medicines, studying both books and herbs under her grandmother's guidance. No wonder she moved with such quiet confidence despite the town's cruelty. Thunder's breathing began to steady. The foam around his muzzle decreased. His legs stopped their frantic kicking. Cora monitored his pulse constantly, adjusting her position to keep pressure off his chest. Is it working? Too early to tell. Hours crawled past like days. Jack dozed fitfully against the fence post, while Cora maintained her vigil beside Thunder. She administered more herbal mixture every hour, forcing the horse to swallow despite his weakness. As the sun crested the eastern hills, Thunder lifted his head. His eyes had cleared, showing awareness instead of pain-filled confusion. He struggled to his feet, wobbling but standing under his own power. Jack stared in disbelief. 12 hours ago, his horse had been dying. Now Thunder was drinking water and nosing at his feed bucket with obvious appetite. How is this possible? Cora packed her herbs away with the same methodical care she had shown during the crisis. Her face showed exhaustion, but also quiet satisfaction. My grandmother always said healing isn't magic. It's just knowing which tools nature provides and how to use them properly. By mid-morning, word had spread throughout Tumbleweed Junction. Neighbors arrived to see the miracle for themselves. Thunder pranced around his corral, showing no signs of his near-death experience. Doc Morrison examined the stallion thoroughly, shaking his head in amazement. He had pronounced hundreds of animals dead from similar symptoms. None had ever recovered. Miss, I don't know what you did, but this horse should be in the ground right now. For the first time since arriving, Cora smiled. Word spread through Tumbleweed Junction like wildfire in drought season. By noon, 3 more neighbors had arrived at Jack's ranch with sick animals. Deputy Sheriff Matthews led his limping dog up the dirt path, hat in hand. Miss Belfield, I hate to bother you, but Rex here stepped on something sharp yesterday. The wound's gone bad. Cora examined the dog's infected paw with gentle efficiency. The animal whimpered but didn't pull away from her touch. She cleaned the wound with herbal solutions and applied a poultice that smelled of mint and something sharper. Keep it dry for 3 days. Clean it twice daily with this mixture. She handed Matthews a small jar filled with amber liquid. The deputy nodded gratefully, pressing a silver dollar into her palm despite her protests. Doc Morrison wanted $5 just to look at him, said it might be too far gone anyway. Jack watched Cora work with growing amazement. Her movements held quiet authority that put both animals and owners at ease. She diagnosed problems with a glance and treated them with herbs most people would dismiss as weeds. The Hendricks family arrived next, their milk cow struggling to walk. Then came old Pete Garrison with his prize rooster, followed by the widow Carson clutching a basket containing her sick cat. Each animal received Cora's careful attention and specific treatment. How do you know which plants to use? My grandmother taught me to listen. Animals tell you what's wrong if you pay attention to the signs. Jack began helping without being asked. He held animals steady while Cora worked, prepared her herbal mixtures, and organized her growing collection of roots and leaves. Their partnership developed naturally, built on shared purpose rather than obligation. That evening, as they cleaned up after the last patient, Jack found himself studying Cora's face in the lamplight. The stress lines around her eyes had softened. Her shoulders no longer carried the defensive tension that had marked her arrival. "You're happy doing this. It's what I was meant for." 3 days later, every animal Cora had treated showed remarkable improvement. Deputy Matthew's dog ran without limping. The Hendricks cow produced more milk than she had in months. Word of the miracle healer spread beyond Tumbleweed Junction to neighboring settlements. Families began arriving from towns 20 miles away, leading sick livestock and carrying caged birds with broken wings. Cora treated them all with the same careful attention, charging modest fees that barely covered her supply costs. Jack converted his barn into a makeshift veterinary clinic. He built examination tables from scrap lumber and organized Cora's herbs into labeled jars. The work suited him better than solitary ranching ever had. "We make a good team." Cora looked up from grinding willow bark, a rare smile crossing her features. The transformation amazed Jack. The frightened girl who had stepped off the train was becoming a confident healer who commanded respect throughout the region. Their relationship deepened beyond partnership. Jack found himself watching for Cora's expressions, learning to read her moods and anticipate her needs. She began seeking his opinions on difficult cases, valuing his observations about animal behavior. Late one evening, as they worked by lamplight treating a horse with colic, their hands brushed while reaching for the same jar of herbs. Neither pulled away immediately. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities neither had expected when she first arrived. "Jack, I know." The unspoken understanding hung in the air like morning mist. They were falling in love, despite every circumstance that should have prevented it. But love blooming in their converted barn couldn't shield them from the larger forces gathering around Tumbleweed Junction. Harrison Blackwood had been making the rounds to local ranchers, offering generous prices for land that had struggled to turn profits for years. The Hendricks family sold their spread for twice what they had expected. The Morrisons followed suit the next week. Blackwood's representatives painted pictures of comfortable retirements in California or fresh starts in Oregon. "Smart money takes the deal," Gideon Marsh announced in the saloon. "Railroads coming through whether we like it or not. Might as well profit from progress." Jack received his offer on a Tuesday morning. The sum was staggering, enough to buy better land elsewhere and start fresh with Cora. But the ranch was his parents' legacy, the only home he had ever known. "What do you think?" Cora studied the official documents, her literacy surprising the railroad representative who had clearly expected to deal only with Jack. "It's generous, too generous." "Meaning what?" "Men don't offer double fair value unless they expect to make 10 times that amount back." Blackwood's pressure campaign intensified after Jack declined the initial offer. Surveyors appeared on neighboring properties, measuring and mapping with military precision. Railroad workers began clearing trees along the proposed route, coming closer to Jack's boundaries each day. Strange accidents started plaguing the holdout families. Fences developed mysterious breaks overnight. Water sources became contaminated with runoff from unknown origins. Livestock began falling ill with symptoms that seemed unconnected to any natural cause. Cora treated the sick animals but noticed disturbing patterns. The illnesses struck multiple ranches simultaneously. The symptoms suggested poisoning rather than disease. Someone was deliberately targeting the remaining holdouts. "We need to be careful," Jack agreed, but careful couldn't protect them from what was coming. Blackwood had resources and political connections that extended far beyond Tumbleweed Junction. Their small success treating animals had made them visible, and visibility brought dangers they were only beginning to understand. The first direct threat arrived with the evening mail, a simple note warning that foreign influences weren't welcome in civilized communities. The message was unsigned, but its meaning was crystal clear. Cora read it without flinching, then fed it to the stove fire. Let them come. The crisis struck on a Wednesday morning like lightning across clear sky. Mrs. Henderson pounded on Jack's door before sunrise, tears streaming down her weathered face. It's happening everywhere. All the animals are sick. Jack and Cora rode into town to find chaos. Horses collapsed in their stalls. Cattle stumbled through pastures, foam coating their muzzles. Chickens lay motionless in their coops while their chicks cried for food. The scale was overwhelming. Every ranch within 10 miles reported the same symptoms striking simultaneously during the night. Doc Morrison stood helplessly in the town square, surrounded by desperate families begging for answers he couldn't provide. Never seen anything like it. It's like a plague hit every animal at once. Cora moved through the crowd with grim purpose, examining the sick animals with growing alarm. The symptoms were identical to Thunder's poisoning, but magnified across dozens of properties. This wasn't random sickness. Someone had orchestrated a systematic attack. Jack helped her collect water samples from various ranches, while she gathered feed specimens for analysis. Her father's teaching in basic chemistry had prepared her to recognize industrial compounds that didn't belong in agricultural settings. Find anything. Chemical residue in the water sources, same metallic taste Thunder's trough had. The pattern became clearer as they investigated. Every affected ranch sat along Blackwood's proposed railroad route. The families who had already sold to him reported no sick animals. The message was brutally obvious. Blackwood arrived in town that afternoon with a team of veterinarians from Kansas City. His men wore expensive suits and carried leather medical bags that cost more than most ranchers earned in a year. Tragic situation. My experts believe it's a natural outbreak of some regional disease. His voice carried practiced sympathy, but his eyes remained cold as winter stone. The visiting veterinarians nodded solemnly, delivering prepared statements about unfortunate but unavoidable natural phenomena. Cora worked 18-hour days treating the poisoned animals, but her herb supplies dwindled rapidly. The sheer number of patients exhausted her reserves of critical medicines. Jack watched her grow thinner and more haggard as she pushed herself beyond human limits. Some families lost patience when their livestock didn't recover immediately. Fear made them desperate for someone to blame. Whispered conversations in the saloon suggested that Cora's healing methods were somehow connected to the outbreak. Mighty convenient that the witch doctor shows up right before all our animals start dying. Gideon Marsh's voice carried clearly through the saloon doors. Jack's hands clenched into fists, but Cora placed a restraining hand on his arm. Fighting him won't help the animals. Blackwood's influence spread through the community like poison in a water source. He offered emergency loans to families facing financial ruin from lost livestock. He promised new opportunities for those willing to relocate. His generosity came with subtle conditions that tightened his control over the town. Sheriff Willis faced increasing pressure to restrict Cora's activities. Complaints poured in from concerned citizens about unlicensed medical practice and potential public health dangers. The sheriff's weathered face showed conflict between duty and conscience. I'm getting orders from the territorial governor's office. They want all unauthorized veterinary work stopped immediately. Jack understood the subtext. Blackwood's political connections reached far beyond Tumbleweed Junction. Money and influence were reshaping the legal landscape to serve his purposes. Despite the official prohibition, families continued bringing their sick animals to Cora under cover of darkness. She treated them in secret, working by candlelight in Jack's barn while he stood watch for unwanted visitors. You're risking everything for people who turned against you. The animals didn't turn against me. Her simple answer revealed the moral clarity that guided her actions. Cora treated suffering wherever she found it, regardless of personal cost or community politics. Jack's respect for her deepened into something more profound than romantic love. He was witnessing true courage, the kind that acted from principle rather than emotion. Her strength made him want to become better than he had ever imagined possible. The investigation Cora conducted in secret revealed damning evidence. Chemical analysis of water samples showed industrial compounds used in railroad construction. The timing of the poisoning coincided perfectly with Blackwood's surveying activities. Maps of affected properties formed a clear pattern along his proposed route. We have enough proof to expose him. Who's going to believe us against a railroad magnate with territorial connections? Jack's question highlighted their impossible situation. Truth meant nothing without the power to make people listen. Blackwood controlled the narrative through money, influence, and fear. The breaking point came when the Garrison family lost their entire herd overnight. 40 head of cattle died from the most severe poisoning yet seen. Old Pete Garrison sat in the dirt beside his dead animals, decades of work destroyed in a single night. Blackwood made his final offer this morning. Take it or face complete ruin. The ultimatum was clear. Sell immediately at reduced prices, or lose everything to systematic poisoning that would continue until resistance collapsed. Several more families accepted Blackwood's offers that week. They loaded their possessions into wagons and left town with hollow eyes and broken spirits. The community was hemorrhaging its soul one family at a time. Jack faced the same impossible choice. His water rights were crucial to Blackwood's plans, making him a primary target for escalating pressure. More anonymous threats arrived daily, warning of consequences for continued resistance. Cora continued documenting evidence while treating the endless stream of poisoned animals. Her notebooks filled with detailed records of symptoms, chemical analyses, and timeline correlations. She was building a comprehensive case against Blackwood's conspiracy. What good will evidence do if no one's left to care? Someone will care. Truth has a way of surviving even when people don't. Her faith in justice seemed naive given their circumstances, but Jack found strength in her unwavering moral conviction. Together, they would either expose Blackwood's crimes or die trying. The official order arrived on a Friday morning, signed by Territorial Judge Hamilton and bearing the governor's seal. Sheriff Willis delivered it personally, his weathered face showing deep regret. Miss Belfield, you're hereby prohibited from practicing any form of veterinary medicine within this territory. Violations will result in immediate arrest and prosecution. Jack read the document twice, his anger building with each legal phrase. Blackwood had used his political connections to weaponize the law itself. They were being systematically isolated and silenced. This is about more than veterinary practice. I know, son, but my hands are tied. That evening, 3 prominent families visited Jack's ranch under cover of darkness. The Hendersons, Morrisons, and Clarks had all lost livestock to the mysterious poisoning. Their desperation outweighed their fear of legal consequences. Our animals are dying. We know the risks, but we're asking anyway. Cora treated their sick cattle in the barn while Jack kept watch from the house. Her herbal supplies were nearly exhausted, but she used what remained with careful precision. These might be the last animals she could save. The families left before dawn, grateful, but haunted by the knowledge that they were breaking territorial law. Fear was reshaping the community's moral landscape, forcing good people to choose between legal compliance and basic compassion. Blackwood escalated his campaign during the following week. More surveyors appeared on properties bordering Jack's ranch, measuring and mapping with obvious purpose. Their presence sent a clear message about his growing confidence in eventual victory. Gideon Marsh led a group of Blackwood supporters to the saloon every evening, spreading rumors about dangerous foreign influences, threatening the community's future. His voice carried the authority of someone backed by powerful interests. Real Americans don't need witch doctors and their heathen remedies. We got proper veterinarians with real education. The division in town deepened daily. Families who had benefited from Cora's healing remained quietly grateful, while others embraced Blackwood's narrative about progress and modernization. Fear made people choose sides based on survival rather than principle. Jack faced increasing pressure to abandon Cora and accept Blackwood's generous offer. Former friends crossed the street to avoid conversation. Business relationships that had sustained his family for decades suddenly became strained and uncomfortable. You could take the money and start fresh somewhere else. With what? My reputation. My word means nothing if I abandon her now. The conversation with Deputy Matthews revealed how completely Blackwood's influence had spread. Even law enforcement officials were questioning their previous support for Jack and Cora. During this period, Cora worked in secret on her most important project. Her notebooks contained detailed documentation of every poisoning incident, complete with chemical analysis and timeline correlations. She was building an irrefutable case against Blackwood's conspiracy. Her father's education proved invaluable for this investigation. Mathematical precision guided her analysis of poison distribution patterns. Scientific methodology strengthened her evidence beyond simple observation or intuition. The chemical signatures are identical across all affected properties. The timing correlates perfectly with surveying activities. The geographical distribution follows the railroad route exactly. Jack studied her meticulous charts and graphs with growing amazement. This wasn't just folk healing wisdom. Cora possessed analytical intelligence that rivaled university-trained professionals. Who's going to believe evidence from someone they've dismissed as an uneducated girl? The evidence speaks for itself. Truth doesn't depend on who discovers it. Her confidence seemed naive given their circumstances, but Jack found strength in her unwavering commitment to justice. She believed in the power of documented facts to overcome prejudice and political influence. The crisis deepened when Blackwood's men began targeting Jack's property directly. His fence lines suffered mysterious damage overnight. His water sources became contaminated with industrial runoff that killed fish and sickened his remaining cattle. They're escalating because we haven't broken yet. Good. Desperate men make mistakes. Cora continued documenting every incident while treating Jack's poisoned animals with her dwindling herb supplies. Each attack provided more evidence for her growing case against Blackwood's criminal conspiracy. The community's moral center was collapsing under sustained pressure. More families accepted buyout offers and left town with their possessions loaded in wagons. Empty houses stood as monuments to Blackwood's systematic destruction of local resistance. Doc Morrison visited Jack's ranch privately during this difficult period. The old veterinarian's face showed conflict between professional jealousy and grudging respect for Cora's superior abilities. That girl knows more about animal healing than I learned in 4 years of veterinary school. It's a shame politics is destroying genuine talent. His admission provided crucial validation for Cora's expertise, but it came too late to influence public opinion. Blackwood's narrative had already taken root in the community's collective consciousness. The breaking point approached when federal marshals arrived in town, ostensibly to investigate reports of illegal medical practice by unqualified individuals. Their presence represented Blackwood's ultimate power play, using federal authority to crush local resistance. Jack realized they were facing their final days of freedom. Once the marshals completed their investigation, Cora would be arrested and removed from the territory. His ranch would become indefensible without her healing abilities to maintain his livestock. "We're out of time." "No, we're out of patience." Cora's response surprised him with its quiet determination. She had finished her investigation and compiled evidence that could expose Blackwood's entire conspiracy. The question was whether anyone would listen before it was too late. That night, She organized her notebooks into a comprehensive presentation that combined scientific analysis with irrefutable documentation. Her father's teaching had prepared her for this moment when truth would face its greatest test against power and prejudice. Tomorrow changes everything. The emergency town meeting convened in the schoolhouse at 8 o'clock sharp. Every chair was filled, with overflow crowds standing along the walls. Federal Marshal Davidson presided from behind the teacher's desk, his stern face promising decisive action. Blackwood sat in the front row, flanked by his team of expensive lawyers and veterinary experts. Their confidence radiated through the packed room like heat from a furnace. They expected a simple formality before removing Cora from the territory permanently. Jack and Cora entered together, carrying her leather satchel and 2 thick notebooks filled with documentation. Hostile whispers followed their progress to seats near the back. Most faces showed curiosity rather than sympathy. Marshal Davidson called for order with sharp authority. His voice carried the weight of federal power that could crush local resistance without appeal. "We're here to investigate reports of unlicensed medical practice and potential public endangerment. Mr. Blackwood, present your case." Blackwood rose with theatrical grace, his expensive suit commanding attention in the humble schoolhouse setting. His opening statement painted pictures of ignorant folk remedies threatening modern progress and public safety. "Gentlemen, we face a choice between superstition and science. This girl practices primitive medicine that endangers both animals and their owners. Her unregulated treatments have coincided with the worst livestock disease outbreak in territorial history." His words carried calculated authority designed to reshape the narrative completely. Cora became the villain responsible for problems she had actually tried to solve. Truth inverted itself through skilled rhetoric and political influence. Several townspeople nodded agreement, swayed by Blackwood's convincing presentation. His veterinary experts provided supporting testimony about the dangers of unregulated practice and the need for proper licensing requirements. Marshal Davidson listened with apparent sympathy for Blackwood's position. Federal authority naturally aligned with organized interests rather than individual practitioners operating outside official channels. "Miss Belfield, you may respond to these serious charges." Cora stood slowly, her notebooks clutched against her chest. The packed room fell silent, expecting stammered excuses or tearful pleas for mercy. Instead, she walked to the front with quiet dignity that commanded unexpected attention. "Marshal Davidson, I'm not here to defend folk medicine or challenge licensing requirements. I'm here to expose criminal conspiracy." Her opening statement electrified the room. Blackwood's confident expression flickered with the first hint of concern. This wasn't the frightened girl he expected to face. Cora opened her first notebook, revealing pages of meticulous documentation. Charts and graphs covered every available surface, showing chemical analysis results, timeline correlations, and geographical distribution patterns. The livestock poisoning wasn't caused by disease or contaminated treatment. It was deliberate criminal sabotage, designed to force land sales through economic terrorism. Her voice carried scientific authority that surprised everyone present. This wasn't emotional pleading but systematic presentation of documented evidence. She had transformed from folk healer into analytical investigator. Every affected ranch sits along Mr. Blackwood's proposed railroad route. The chemical signatures in contaminated water sources match industrial compounds used in railroad construction. The timing of poisoning incidents correlates perfectly with surveying activities. Jack watched the room's atmosphere shift as Cora's evidence accumulated. Faces that had shown hostility began reflecting confusion and growing alarm. She was dismantling Blackwood's entire narrative with mathematical precision. Furthermore, ranches that accepted Mr. Blackwood's buyout offers reported no sick animals throughout the crisis period. The poisoning targeted only properties he needed to acquire through forced sales. Blackwood shot to his feet, his composure cracking under unexpected assault. These are wild accusations from someone desperate to avoid prosecution. Where's her proof of these supposed chemicals? Cora smiled for the first time since entering the schoolhouse. She reached into her satchel, pulling out dozens of labeled glass bottles containing water samples from every affected ranch. I preserved evidence from each poisoning site. Independent analysis will confirm the presence of industrial compounds that don't occur naturally in agricultural settings. Marshal Davidson examined the bottles with growing interest. Federal marshals dealt with railroad corruption regularly. Cora's systematic approach impressed him more than Blackwood's political connections. You conducted this investigation yourself. My father taught me basic chemistry and scientific methodology. Truth doesn't require impressive credentials, just careful observation and honest documentation. The room erupted as families realized the scope of Blackwood's deception. Voices rose in angry confusion as people connected their losses to deliberate criminal action rather than natural disaster. Doc Morrison stood from his seat near the window, his weathered face showing professional respect for Cora's work. Marshal, I've reviewed this young lady's documentation. Her analysis is more thorough than anything I could have produced. The evidence speaks for itself. His endorsement carried significant weight with the community. If their longtime veterinarian accepted Cora's conclusions, the conspiracy was undeniably real. Blackwood's lawyers huddled frantically, recognizing that their client's situation had deteriorated beyond political repair. Federal marshals took criminal evidence seriously, regardless of territorial political influences. Mr. Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, and destruction of property. Your associates will be detained pending further investigation. The arrest happened swiftly and decisively. Blackwood's protests about political connections fell on deaf ears as federal handcuffs replaced his confidence with desperate fear. Gideon Marsh tried to slip out during the confusion, but found his path blocked by angry neighbors who remembered his role in spreading Blackwood's lies. His betrayal of the community would have lasting consequences. The meeting dissolved into celebrations and apologies as families approached Cora with gratitude and shame. People who had turned against her now recognized the courage required to fight such powerful opposition. Jack stood beside Cora as the community reformed around their vindicated partnership. They had exposed corruption through intelligence and persistence rather than violence or revenge. 6 months later, their veterinary practice served 3 counties from a proper clinic built with community support. Cora had earned official recognition from the territorial government, while Jack managed the business side of their growing operation. Their wedding ceremony filled the same schoolhouse where truth had triumphed over power. The community they had saved celebrated the union that had saved them in return.